So capacity means the ability to use and understand information, to make a decision and communicate any decision made. So this is important. So there are three elements here. That is what about using and understanding information, and processing that information, and then communicating any decision made. So a person lacks capacity if their mind is impaired or disturbed in some way. So clearly, if there is some kind of impairment in the mind, then you can say that a person lacks capacity, depending on how severe that impairment is. So this is an understanding as we see capacity from a Western perspective. And it makes a lot of sense. You know, we can't deny that these elements are really, really important. But then there's something we can't deny also, and that is that our Islamic tradition has a lot to say about this. So we reflect on what that essence is that we need to know from our tradition, our Islamic tradition, and how that supports us in making very, very important decisions, especially in relation to issues of acts of worship in particular, because that's not something the Western capacity understanding will directly affect. But we have to have our own understanding from our tradition about what capacity means. When is a person obligated to read their Salah? When is a person obligated to fast from a mental health perspective? And taklif is a religious obligation. Now, one very, very important thing to understand is, even though we are talking about mental illness a lot of the time, reality is that there's very little, if any, overlap of mental illness with the understanding of taklif or religious obligations, or whether somebody has a capacity for religious obligations, i.e. whether they have taklif. Yeah, there's very little overlap found in classical literature. So Muslim scholars, classical Muslim scholars in particular, did not relate the two closely. They saw them as two separate entities. And I'll explain the reason why that is as we go along. But probably the most important thing to understand that is that they didn't connect one particular diagnosis of a mental health issue and attach this idea of capacity to that. Rather, what they did was they identified the whole understanding around a legal understanding and definition of religious obligations. And it so happens that somebody with this particular mental illness may have that or may not have that. And that's the approach that was taken. And it's a very sort of clever approach. And it's very real in the sense that it's very practical. And it produces good results.